Your mind isn't tired because you think too much. It's tired because it never gets to stop thinking. This is still mind, a quiet place to think clearly. Most people believe tiredness comes from effort. Work harder, get tired. Rest, then recover. That logic makes sense for the body. But what you're experiencing doesn't follow that rule. You wake up tired. You rest and still feel heavy. You reduce your workload, yet somehow feel worse. That's confusing. And because it doesn't fit the usual explanation, people assume something is wrong with you. But nothing is wrong. This kind of exhaustion doesn't come from doing. It comes from never arriving. Your mind is rarely where your body is. Even when you stop moving, the mind keeps running. It's ahead of the moment, replaying conversations, anticipating problems, holding unfinished tasks open in the background. So while your body is resting, your mind is still working. That's why rest doesn't feel like rest. True recovery requires arrival, not just stopping activity, but allowing the mind to land in the present moment, without pressure to solve anything. But modern life trains the opposite. We live in constant anticipation, constant preparation, always bracing for what's next. And over time, the mind forgets how to settle, a mind that never arrives, never rests. It carries every unfinished thought, like an open browser tab, quiet but draining power. Eventually, the exhaustion shows up, not as sleepiness, but as heaviness, resistance, a lack of clarity. And because there's no single task to point to, it feels impossible to fix. You try doing less. You try resting more. But nothing changes because the source isn't physical effort. It's mental suspension. The mind is always mid-journey, never allowed to reach a conclusion. Understanding this matters because the solution isn't pushing harder or escaping responsibilities. It's learning how to arrive, to let moments finish, to close mental loops, to be where you already are. When the mind arrives, rest happens naturally, not because you earned it, but because nothing is chasing you anymore. Most people believe tiredness comes from effort. You work hard, you get tired. You rest, and you recover. This model works well for the body. Muscles fatigue when they're used. The heart slows when activity stops. Sleep repairs what effort breaks down. But what you're experiencing doesn't follow that pattern. You wake up tired. You rest and still feel heavy. You do less, yet the exhaustion remains or even deepens. That confusion is important. It tells us the source of the tiredness isn't physical effort. This kind of exhaustion doesn't come from doing. It comes from never arriving. To arrive mentally means allowing the mind to fully settle into the present moment. It means finishing a thought instead of carrying it forward. It means being where your body already is. Most modern minds rarely do this. Even when nothing is happening, the mind stays in motion. It jumps ahead to future responsibilities, replays past moments, or keeps a silent list of things that are unresolved. The mind is always preparing, bracing, or monitoring. So, while the body may be resting, the mind never truly stops working. That's why rest doesn't feel restorative. True rest requires psychological closure. Without it, the mind remains alert, quietly scanning for what's next. This creates a unique form of fatigue. It isn't the tiredness of effort. It's the tiredness of suspension. Imagine holding an object with your arm extended. The weight itself might not be heavy, but holding it indefinitely becomes exhausting. Not because of movement, but because of continuous tension. That's what unresolved mental activity feels like. Unfinished tasks, unmade decisions, unprocessed emotions, unanswered questions. Each one creates a low-level pull on attention. Individually, they seem manageable. Together, they create constant mental strain. And because none of this feels like work, it's hard to recognize as effort. You're not tired from doing too much. You're tired from never being. The human mind was not designed for constant openness. It needs edges, endings, silence between events. In older rhythms of life, these edges existed naturally. Day ended and night came. Work ended and rest began. Conversation ended and silence returned. There were gaps. Not empty gaps, but resting ones. Silence wasn't something you searched for. It appeared on its own. Those closures mattered more than we realize. Each ending gave the mind permission to settle, to release what was holding, to arrive where the body already was. But that structure is mostly gone now. The day no longer truly ends. Messages remain unanswered. Notifications wait. Feeds never reach a final page. Thoughts stay open. Not loudly, not urgently, just slightly. Every unfinished task, every unanswered message, every postponed decision keeps the mind gently alert. Not stressed. Alert. That's the danger. Because alertness feels manageable. It doesn't set off alarms. It doesn't demand attention. It simply keeps the system awake. And alertness drains energy quietly. There is no moment where you feel it happen. No clear cause. No obvious breakdown. You just notice one day that everything feels heavier. Starting feels harder. Rest doesn't restore. Even doing nothing feels tiring. This is why your mind can feel exhausted, even when nothing is happening. Externally, things are still. Internally, something never stops. The mind is always tracking, always holding, always prepared to respond. And because it never fully closes, it never fully rests. This isn't a flaw. It's a mismatch between how the mind evolved and how life now unfolds. The mind needs completion. It needs silence not as an absence, but as a boundary. Without boundaries, everything stays slightly open. And over time, that openness becomes weight. Understanding this changes how you listen to your tiredness. It's not asking for escape. It's not asking for motivation. It's asking for edges, for moments. When tiredness shows up, most people reach for distraction. Scrolling, videos, background noise. It feels like relief. For a moment, the discomfort fades. The pressure softens. Attention is pulled outward. But distraction doesn't rest the mind. It divides it. Instead of one tired thought, the mind now holds many shallow ones. None of them are heavy on their own, but none of them finish. The mind jumps from image to image, from sound to sound, from idea to idea, never settling, never completing. This creates movement without resolution. And movement without resolution is not rest, it's stimulation. So even while the body is still, the mind stays active, busy but unfocused. This is why silence feels uncomfortable now. Silence removes the external pull. It stops feeding the mind new material. And when that happens, everything that was fragmented comes back into view. Unfinished thoughts, unprocessed feelings, lingering tension. Silence doesn't create this busyness. It reveals it. That's why many people avoid silence. Not because it's empty, but because it's honest. Avoidance feels easier in the moment. Another scroll, another video, another layer of noise. But avoidance is expensive. Each time rest is postponed, the mind carries its load forward. Nothing is resolved. Nothing is released. Over time, postponed rest turns into chronic exhaustion. Not the exhaustion of effort, but the exhaustion of never arriving. True rest doesn't come from escape. It comes from allowing the mind to finish what it's holding. Silence is not the enemy of rest. It's the doorway to it. And once the mind learns that it's safe to be quiet again, it no longer needs distraction to survive the day. It settles, and in settling, it recovers. Real rest doesn't begin when the body stops moving. It begins when the mind trusts that nothing urgent is being ignored. As long as something feels unfinished, the mind stays slightly alert. Not anxious, not stressed, just watchful. That watchfulness prevents rest. So real rest requires trust. And trust only comes from closure. Finishing one thing fully, letting it end, then stopping, not multitasking, not half-resting with a screen nearby, not relaxing while keeping attention open. One thought, one moment, then silence. This feels unnatural at first, because the mind has been trained to stay open, to monitor, to anticipate, to prepare for what might come next. So when silence appears, the mind initially resists it. It reaches for stimulation, for movement, for distraction, not because silence is wrong, but because stillness is unfamiliar. But if you stay, without forcing anything, something begins to change. The mind notices that nothing collapses, nothing urgent appears, nothing is lost, and slowly, the background noise lowers. Thoughts don't disappear, they soften. The constant tension eases, the feeling of pressure loosens, and the tiredness changes quality. It's no longer heavy, no longer draining. Energy begins to return, not explosively, not in bursts of motivation, but steadily, quietly. This kind of energy doesn't need to be chased. It doesn't spike and crash. It stays, because it comes from completion, not stimulation. Rest doesn't require escape. It requires permission. Permission for the mind to close what it's holding and arrive fully where it already is. That's where rest actually begins. When the mind never closes, rest feels useless. You stop moving, but nothing inside actually ends. The body pauses. The mind stays open, so rest feels shallow, incomplete, unsatisfying. This is why so many people say they've tried resting, and it didn't work. They took time off. They slowed down. They slept more. But the exhaustion remained. Not because rest is ineffective, but because rest alone doesn't close the mind. A mind that stays open cannot recover. It keeps listening, keeps monitoring, keeps preparing. And without closure, even silence feels thin. This misunderstanding creates frustration. People assume they're doing something wrong, that they're broken, that they need more discipline or stronger motivation. But the problem isn't effort. It's that rest is being asked to fix something it can't reach. Mental exhaustion isn't caused by a lack of rest. It's caused by a lack of completion. And until that difference is understood, rest will always feel disappointing. In the next reflection, we'll explore why rest alone doesn't resolve mental exhaustion and what actually does. Not by adding effort, not by pushing harder, but by allowing the mind to finally close.